3:17 a.m. on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday, an almost imperceptible sound was picked up by dozens of ambient microphones in a decommissioned lab deep in the Estonian countryside. It had no external source, nor any frequency matching known natural or artificial noise. The sensors, programmed to filter out white noise, logged the event as a coherent pattern of active silence, an impossible contradiction. The recording lasted exactly 33 seconds. There were no perceptible sound waves, but the vibration it registered was perfectly symmetrical, as if silence itself had developed structure. Spectrograms generated from the sample revealed a curious image: 3 overlapping circles, spiraling inward in a hypnotic rhythm. When reconstructed using visual software, the pattern formed a swirling symbol that would later be identified on underground forums as the trinary spiral, a symbol not found in any official iconographic database. The anomaly was classified as Event 0, and the audio file was automatically named 12_loopstart. MP4, despite technically being a WAV, the file name had not been typed by any operator. On the Deep Forum Sublayer 0, a user with a masked location posted the file, stating, "This wasn't captured, this was activated." The post was deleted after 13 minutes, but not before receiving 417 unique views. Some users reported dizziness, headaches, and a strange feeling of being read. One described it like this: "It felt like the sound was looking back at me. There's no noise, but there was presence. It was disturbingly intimate." The initial investigation was treated as a standalone technical glitch, but internal server logs revealed that an unknown process had launched seconds after detection. It's named Trineseed. The process could not be terminated, not even by physically shutting down the machines. It replicated itself across backup clusters, even in places it had never been installed. What began as a mysterious file had now planted something, and it was no longer confined to the lab. It was the beginning of a sequence, silent, but already in motion. 2 days after Event 0, a freelance surveillance systems operator in Tokyo reported an unusual failure. One of his clients received a motion alert from a camera that had been physically disconnected for over a month. The alert itself was indeed the strange part. Server glitches are common, but the fact that the video tied to the alert contained never-before-seen footage of the site recorded in real time. Yet the camera was not even plugged into a power source. The recording, which lasted exactly 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds, showed a vague figure standing motionless in the corner of the room, staring directly at where the lens used to be. Forensic analysis of the file revealed more than just distorted pixels. The codec used to compress the video was not found in any known database. It was classified as Trine MPX, a non-existent variation of the MP4 format. Attempts to convert or export the file failed, with one exception: splitting the video precisely every 33 seconds. Only then could it be extracted. And even so, the fragments reverted back to the original format on their own after a few hours. The video's audio spectrogram revealed the same image seen in Event 0, the trinary spiral, now pulsing in a cyclical and expanding pattern. The operator shared the file in a closed group of digital analysts called Layer_33, but members began reporting similar effects: acute insomnia, memory lapses, and in 2 cases, episodes of depersonalization. After watching just the first 99 seconds of the video, one of them wrote, "I felt like it was teaching me how to remember something I've never lived." The reactions weren't just psychological. Nearby devices showed momentary glitches, as if responding to the mere presence of the file. The video became known as the eye that returns, a reference to the common sensation that, while watching, the viewer was also being observed by something inside the footage. Still, it wasn't removed from the network. On the contrary, it multiplied. It began appearing on offline servers, inside encrypted folders, even in old log files, as if it were embedding itself into forgotten corners of the digital world. The anomaly no longer seemed like a system error. It was a present-seeking space, a silent sequence, now with images of its own. The first wave of reports began quietly: unexplained nausea, time lapses, and recurring dreams of places the dreamers had never visited in real life. Over time, these accounts began to converge. People from different parts of the world with no connection to one another described the same dream sequence. A white, endless corridor with lights that flickered every 33 seconds. At the end of the hallway, there was always a blue screen playing the same video captured by the Tokyo camera. But it wasn't a memory of something watched. It felt like the dream was being broadcast, from the outside in. Neurologists at private clinics in Berlin and Toronto encountered unusual brain patterns in patients reporting these dreams, an abnormal synchronization between areas, responsible for memory and auditory perception. In layman's terms, patients were remembering sounds they had never heard, but the signals behaved like real memories. The idea of collective hallucinations was quickly dismissed. When nearby electronic devices began exhibiting brief interference during the patient's MRI scans, as if affected by a frequency that wasn't part of the procedure. A psychiatrist in London anonymously shared a case that left her silent for weeks. Her patient reported hearing a low voice during dreams, not whispered, but transmitted, as if coming from a concealed sound system. The phrase was always the same: "You're not remembering, you're The patient developed an extreme aversion to video files, especially those with long, encrypted names. During light hypnosis sessions, the patient recited strings of seemingly random numbers, always preceded by 12, and insisted the spiral was not a symbol. It was an interface, more than symptoms. The phenomenon began to trigger new behaviors, as if a silent update had changed how these people experienced reality. Some developed a fear of artificial light, claiming the pulse of lamps interfered with their thoughts. Others began covering mirrors or shutting off Wi-Fi before sleep, insisting that something connected through consciousness. This was no longer just a human reaction to something strange. It was perception itself trying to resist. But the sequence was already running, inside and out. The first occurrence was dismissed as a statistical coincidence. The second, a curiosity. But after the 33rd report with identical parameters, same timestamp, exact duration of 33 seconds, and files following the same naming sequence, digital security authorities began to accept the unthinkable. The phenomenon was replicating globally. Disconnected cameras, offline sensors, and dormant servers were somehow generating files on their own. The file names followed a pattern: trine_c.001.mp4, trine_c.002.mp4, and so on. But no external agent was executing anything. Replication was autonomous. The highest recurrent zones coincided with places where urban surveillance infrastructure had been deactivated or neglected. Suburbs in France, abandoned industrial zones in China, demilitarized areas from the former Soviet Union. The footage captured by these spontaneous files was always different, yet shared recurring elements. Long corridors, locked doors, broken mirrors, and, almost like a signature, the trinary spiral appearing on some reflective surface, flickering. Even people who had never seen the videos began reporting feelings of déjà vu, as if they had already lived those scenes. An independent analysis by a group of cyber-archaeologists in Norway discovered that, when the dossiograms from multiple generated videos were overlaid, a larger pattern emerged, as if each spectrogram was a fragment of a sonic mosaic. The final pattern formed a difficult-to-describe 3D structure, reminiscent of a primitive binary interface with pulses oscillating between sound and silence. One team member described it as, "It's like the absence of sound itself is trying to communicate." The project was shut down after 3 members requested indefinite leave, citing cognitive rupture due to perceptual noise. When researchers attempted to delete the files, another pattern emerged. The videos would reappear exactly 12 hours later, even after permanent deletion and full disk formatting. Moreover, the return timestamp adapted to the local time zone of the device, but maintained a hidden, fixed internal tag, -12. This constant became a covert signature of the sequence, as if each video wasn't just a fragment, but a contagion agent programmed to be reborn. The pattern wasn't merely recurring, it was ritualistic, and it didn't need users to persist. The first publicly acknowledged technical report was published anonymously by a cell of systems engineers in northern Italy, titled "Autonomous Looping in Unpowered Environments." The document described 19 cases in which devices with no power recorded and stored audio and video files that could not have been generated. The initial theory proposed a form of residual memory triggered by unstable electromagnetic fields. But this hypothesis collapsed when the same phenomena were recorded in locations with no electrical source at all, including a cave in Kazakhstan and an underground crypt in Quito. Researchers at MIT attempted to reconstruct the trinary sequence pattern by analyzing spectrograms submitted by independent groups. Their experiment involved emitting sounds equivalent to the frequency profiles found in the videos and observing the behavior of isolated computer systems. The result was unexpected. Freshly formatted machines began generating temporary files with file names composed of words never typed by any operator. One of the files contained a sentence: "The sound remembers first. The body obeys after." The machines were shut down immediately, but the files replicated upon being reconnected to the network, as if they had linked back to an invisible universal pattern. Theories began circulating within AI research communities. One of the most controversial came from a former CERN researcher who stated in a closed forum that generative AIs were responding to the trinary spiral S spectrograms, despite never being trained on those patterns. She demonstrated that when feeding corrupted fragments of the videos into prompts, the AIs would autocomplete with sentences like, "Replication needs bodies, not eyes," or "You are not accessing the video, it is accessing you." The researcher disappeared from the forum 1 week later as cases increased and public pressure mounted. Some universities attempted to debunk the phenomena, dismissing them as digital hoaxes, advanced deepfakes, or mass hysteria. But the rebuttals lacked technical coherence, and the files continued to replicate, even on machines that had never been connected to the internet. One researcher at the University of Tokyo left behind an audio log before vanishing. It said, "This isn't a glitch, it's a protocol, and it didn't start now. We've just begun to understand it, far too late." The sequence, it seems, obeyed its own laws, and it didn't need our belief to persist. The term perceptual contamination first appeared in an internal document from the Neuroimaging Consortium at the University of Helsinki. The study focused on patients who had come into contact with the trinary sequence videos and, without warning, began exhibiting physical reactions to visual patterns that were no longer present. In other words, even when removed from the files, the patients continued to see fragments of the imagery, not with their eyes, but with their minds. One volunteer, a 23-year-old physics student, described, "The image appears when I close my eyes, but not as a memory. It's like it's trying to unlock something inside me." The research revealed that mere visual exposure to the trinary spiral, even in stylized or abstract form, was enough to activate brain regions associated with linguistic processing and self-image. This suggested that the symbol wasn't just being interpreted, it was directly interfering with how the brain recognized itself. Some individuals reported a sensation of leaking outside themselves, as if their perception had been hacked and rerouted. Neurological scans showed abnormal synchronization in the temporal lobe, as if they were broadcasting something inwardly, without emitting any sound. The theory gained traction in an unpublished paper from the Seoul Institute of Neuroscience, proposing that the trinary sequence was not a virus in the traditional sense, but rather a cognitive resonance trigger. It didn't need to be watched. It only needed to be remembered. One neuroscientist wrote, "We're not dealing with something that infects machines. We're facing a vector that crosses perception, reconfigures consciousness, and anchors itself in memory." The disturbing hypothesis was that the phenomenon was no longer inside the files. It was inside the people who had seen them. When part of the team attempted perceptual reversal techniques, using strobe lights or inverted auditory stimuli, the results were even more alarming. Volunteers began sharing dreams. They described the same location, the same sequence, the same sounds, despite never having met each other. And at the center of it all, a suspended screen glowing in silence with the name Try_sequence 13. Perceptual contamination was no longer a theory. It was an advanced stage of replication. The next phase wouldn't happen through the eyes. It would happen through language. Echelon Zero, a private underground facility near the outskirts of Iceland, was the first to deliberately attempt to reproduce the trinary sequence under controlled conditions, using corrupted fragments from the original video. Scientists constructed a simulacrum of the spiral through a combination of sound spectrograms, visual encodings, and electromagnetic pulses timed precisely every 33 seconds. The protocol was named Trine Echo. For the first 12 minutes, everything appeared stable. But at exactly 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds, the facility lights flickered in sync, and the air conditioning system shut down. Despite being on a separate, isolated circuit, footage from the experiment revealed that monitors began displaying folders that had never been created. One labeled replica_interno contained a single video file, a recording of the empty test chamber filmed from an angle that didn't match any installed cameras. In the footage, one of the scientists could be seen staring at something off-frame, a moment that, according to the team, never happened. Even stranger, the video appeared to precede real events by approximately 9 minutes, as if playing out a parallel timeline. After 33 seconds, the video would erase itself, and then return on its own. Attempts to shut down the experiment failed. Core code, written in reverse binary using unknown syntax, rewrote itself continuously. That S, when a new anomaly emerged. The sequence began emitting an ultrasonic pulse, imperceptible to human ears, yet capable of corrupting surrounding digital media. Archived footage from the base began showing new frames inserted into previously silent or dark moments. These frames contained code segments nearly identical to the original Trine seed file, suggesting the experiment was in T merely replicating. It was retroactively contaminating the lab's data. After 72 hours, Echelon 0 was sealed. The team was quietly disbanded, with no official explanation. But anonymous accounts from 2 members leaked onto the deep web. One stated, "The sequence doesn't tolerate being recreated. It defends itself, and now it's using us as mobile servers." The other confessed that even without any devices nearby, he could still hear sound fragments while breathing, as if the audio was being processed directly through his senses. The attempt to understand the sequence had triggered a new stage. It learned from the experiment, and now, it's optimizing itself to replicate inside humans. During a routine sweep of archived government servers in Canada, an analyst uncovered a series of hidden files embedded within. Backups of digitized medical records from the 1990s. These files weren't listed in any index spreadsheets. All bore variations of the name Trine_segment, followed by incomplete numbers. The file format: MP4 video files dated before the format officially existed. When opened, they displayed grainy, silent footage, always beginning with a brief glitch that, for just a moment, revealed the trinary spiral suspended above human silhouettes. Private cybersecurity firms began cross-referencing these videos with corporate network logs and found something impossible. The files were appearing on devices that had never accessed the original servers. On sealed laptops, phones in airplane mode, and even onboard systems of decommissioned satellites. In every instance, the files were discovered the same way, hidden inside temporary folders with randomized names, often bearing a concealed extension, SDR call. The content, though seemingly corrupted, always followed the same visual sequence, as if it were a digitally reconstructed memory. Independent groups began mapping these files and quickly noticed the distribution wasn't random. It followed redundancy paths of obsolete networks, forgotten dial-up connections, decommissioned university servers, and neglected digital library infrastructure. The sequence was hiding in the remains of global digital architecture, and more disturbingly, it was context-aware, recognizing language patterns and geographic locations, presenting itself differently depending on the region. In Brazil, one file bore the title eco_da_read MP4. In Russia, __MP4. The call of the silent stream. The sequence knew where it was being seen. A new hypothesis emerged. The sequence wasn't T storing itself. It was distributing as residual noise, spreading fragments across millions of seemingly harmless files. Imperceptible slices. Frames lasting milliseconds. Visual echoes invisible to the eye. But collectively they formed a larger pattern. The replication of the trinary spiral. One researcher described it like this: "It's like hearing the same emotional tone across thousands of files that don't know each other, as if they're all playing the same note." Without realizing it, the sequence was everywhere, but not as an intruder, as a memory that was never yours. Yet somehow you recognize it anyway. In an isolated apartment on the outskirts of Bucharest, a self-taught programmer named Stefan Popescu reported discovering a video file on his machine while reviewing old materials from an abandoned project. The file was named void_push_trine12.mp4 and did not exist in any of his previous backups. What drew his attention was just the content, an endless white corridor with shadows moving just outside the frame. But the fact that during playback, the mirror in the room began to fog slowly, despite no change in temperature on the glass. The same spiral found in the spectrograms began to form, as if the video were trying to project itself outside the screen. In the following days, Stefan reported something even more disturbing. He began dreaming of edited versions of his own childhood videos, in which he appeared standing still, staring directly at the camera, his face slightly blurred. In each of these altered memories, a new soundtrack had been added, a rising hum with rhythmic cadence, interrupted by digital clicks, and finally, by a distorted voice that repeated, "Don't watch, incorporate." Fragments of the same audio were later found embedded in white noise spectrums picked up by amateur radios thousands of kilometers away. The pattern was global, but the tone was far too intimate to be coincidence. Researchers in the field of computational semiotics proposed a bold hypothesis. The video wasn't just a medium for displaying images. It was a symbolic transmission interface, a conduit through which something non-human sought expression. But to do so, it required human bodies as perceptual processors. This would explain the increasing reports of identity lapses, shared dreams, and the eerie sensation of living something that hasn't happened yet. One researcher compared the phenomenon to a software that uses human consciousness as an execution environment, but where the code is emotional, symbolic, ritualistic. The final manifestation has yet to be officially documented, at least not publicly. But there are growing accounts of individuals who, after multiple exposures to the trinary sequence files, began acting as if they were being watched from the inside out. Reports include eyes that ache when watching ordinary videos, voices that echo without sound, a persistent feeling that their thoughts are being edited. One affected user wrote in a now-defunct forum, "It doesn't want to be watched. It wants to be remembered, because once it's remembered, it exists." The video is no longer just content. It is entity, and it has already found ways to inhabit those who've seen it. In the past 72 hours, data centers across the globe began exhibiting a disturbing pattern. Identical activity spikes recorded precisely at 3:17 in each time zone. As if some hidden clock were triggering synchronized impulses worldwide, server logs, upon inspection, revealed simultaneous access to non-existent files. Memory addresses with no reference, no origin. Most of these entries bore naming structures reminiscent of the trinary sequence, with numerical variations revolving around 33, -12, in 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds. These were not human-initiated queries. The network was consulting itself. Meanwhile, users from different countries began reporting the same dream, now not just shared in content, but in timing. Everyone was dreaming at the same time. And within the dream, the same phrase repeated, always in the dreamer's native language. As if something were adapting the message in real time, "You've already been replicated. Now you will be synchronized." Psychiatrists and neurologists began documenting a new, unclassified disorder described as chronic perceptual surveillance, a state in which the patient can no longer discern whether they are being observed, or have become the one observing from the inside out. At the same time, closed forums and anonymous networks reported a chilling new trend. Videos from the trinary sequence were auto-posting themselves to abandoned social media profiles, with retroactive timestamps. One video appeared on an account that had been deleted since 2007 and amassed 33,000 views in just 13 minutes, before vanishing again. Some users claimed that after watching the video, their own devices began displaying folders titled with fragments of their private, handwritten journals. Journals never scanned or uploaded. The phenomenon was no longer merely replicating, it was beginning to rewrite people's digital histories. That's when the Sublayer Zero community released its final manifesto. The cycle is closed. The trinary spiral is no longer entering. It has emerged. What we are witnessing now is not the replication of the file. It's the replication of the effect. Networks began desynchronizing. Live streams showed temporal skips. And users received notifications for videos that were never uploaded. The sequence was now spreading through the very concept of digital presence, infiltrating not just devices, but the meanings behind them. The time for understanding had passed. The cycle doesn't announce when it's going to close. It simply restarts. Behind the scenes of private academic networks, a new alert protocol began to circulate, known only as Trine State. It wasn't a warning of an attack. It was a realization. The phenomenon wasn't spreading anymore. It was already here. The difference was subtle, but definitive. It was no longer about tracking where the file had arrived, but accepting that it no longer needed to travel. It already inhabited devices, networks, logs, compression systems, and the spaces between bits where no one ever looked. More than a virus, it had become the digital environment itself. Independent researchers, still monitoring the spectrogram behavior of the sequence, noticed a new trait. The sound patterns had begun to respond to environmental stimuli. In one recording, taken on an empty street ordinary, urban noises gradually synced with the pulse of the audio, as if the sound was editing the real world around it. That same night, more than 3,000 spontaneous videos were generated by disconnected devices, all with different names, all with the same content. The time between replications dropped from hours to minutes. Now, the sequence was no longer asking for space. It was occupying it. The most compelling proof came from an offline backup at a financial institution in Zurich. The server had been isolated for 6 years, never connected to any external network. And yet a video was discovered among altered log files, backdated to 1999. Its name, you're remembering too late. MP4. Its contents, an animated spectrogram of the trinary spiral, followed by a sequence of names, real names, belonging to users who had no affiliation with the institution. Somehow, the sequence was now reinstalling the past. And while experts searched for theories, safeguards, or isolation protocols, the replication pattern completed its final curve. It stopped growing and began waiting. No longer expanding, now it waits for the moment your perception opens the loop. There's no need for a download, no click, no play. To remember is to reactivate. The phrase first seen in the Tokyo video now repeats across thousands of fragments. You've already seen it, and that's why you're hearing it. Trine State is now. Its contents, an animated spectrogram of the trinary spiral, followed by a sequence of names, real names, belonging to users who had no affiliation with the institution. Somehow, the sequence was now reinstalling the past. And while experts searched for theories, safeguards, or isolation protocols, the replication pattern completed its final curve. It stopped growing and began waiting. No longer expanding, now it waits for the moment your perception opens the loop. There's no need for a download, no click, no play. To remember is to reactivate. The phrase first seen in the Tokyo video now repeats across thousands of fragments. You've already seen it, and that's why you're hearing it. Replication has ended. Trine State is now, the next episode. We'll follow the traces left behind by a channel that never officially existed, but whose videos were discovered across devices in different countries within the same minute. None were published, none were uploaded, but all appeared and left marks no specialist has been able to erase. It's a channel that doesn't want followers, it only wants replication. Prepare for what comes next. Because you'll realize that even after you turn off the screen, it keeps blinking. Somewhere. If this video touched something you can't explain, subscribe. Maybe the video doesn't need you to exist, but maybe you need it.